Last year, DC's Rebirth initiative burst onto the scene with their bold Rebirth one-shot and a new slate of comics featuring new creative teams and the surprise return of a few veteran creators to their line. One of the most intriguing being the return of Christopher Priest to superhero comics with the Deathstroke ongoing title. Priest has been known in the past for his influential superhero runs, particularly on Black Panther, but can he rekindle that magic for today's comics readership? For now, that question will have to be left unanswered till more of his run is available, but this is a damn good start. Deathstroke is not a character I'm all too familiar with in the comics. Good news is you don't have to be an expert to appreciate this story. Volume 1 serves as a crash course on Slade from his toxic family life as a failed father, his complicated relationship with his colleagues in the present, and a clear direction for the series going forward. What stands out right away is the lack of bombastic action. Instead, Deathstroke's tactical knowledge is at the forefront. He doesn't typically engage in conflicts directly. Instead, he prefers to take down his enemies with precise strikes from the shadows, or fool an enemy into believing he's on their side just long enough to get what he wants and then stab them in the back at the last possible moment. That emphasis on the tactical mind is what brings this character to life. He's a man of focus and is willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. At the beginning, it's just about killing people for money, business as usual, but it becomes more personal when it's revealed that someone is targeting people from Slade's past. He then tears his way through a war-torn country, the criminal underworld, and even Gotham City for answers. Priest Deathstroke is a flat-out supervillain. Part of the issue when you have a villain-centric ongoing in superhero comics is the temptation for writers to skirt around that issue a bit by making them more likable to offset the horrible things they do, or to make them misunderstood, amongst other explanations. Priest doesn't really do that with Deathstroke, though. You understand a lot more about him throughout the story, but it doesn't excuse his actions. Matter of fact, other characters go out of their way to say, on no uncertain terms, he's not an anti-hero, he's a supervillain. If he happens to do something good as a result of his goal, it's more of a happy accident than his intent. He does stop a genocide in one of the early issues, but once again, that was not his intended end goal. Family dynamics also help to separate the series from what I've read of the previous Deathstroke titles, mainly regarding the New 52. The first half of this trade is peppered with flashbacks involving his family and all their toxic glory. He used to be a married man with a couple kids, and you get to see that Slade was a terrible father. He constantly diminishes his kids for being weak and stupid, and even in one of the earliest flashbacks, takes out his belt to whip one of them for running out the battery on their car, which then leads into some pretty gruesome consequences involving a bear, which he has to kill in order to save his kid. But instead of being concerned for his kid's safety, he then scolds that kid for making him do that since he now has to go and kill the bear's cubs. His relationship with his wife doesn't fare much better. She is actually the one who trained him before his Deathstroke persona and even fought alongside him at points. But whatever love they had for each other is pretty much gone at this point. Their dynamic has devolved into constant fights in the bedroom, which inevitably leads to the two screwing each other as their only way of resolving their fight. Down to its core, their conflict is based on resentment over the fact that Slade goes on various missions and leaves her to look after their kids. Eventually, this culminates in a bloody end for the entire Wilson family in a scene that most Deathstroke fans are likely to be familiar with, but it's bound to be one hell of a gut punch for new readers like myself. The second half of the book features Rose, which is his third kid and essentially his last chance as a parent. Their relationship isn't conveyed through many flashbacks like his other family members, but instead is based on how Slade treats her in the present. On the surface, he still demeans her for her skills and viewpoints, but there are hints that those remarks are his only way of showing that he cares, which is pretty fascinating. I'd actually be curious to see more of their dynamic later on, especially since Rose is kind of a superhero, so it adds another layer of tension onto an already tenuous father-daughter dynamic. She also has a precog ability which does lead to some creative panel layouts and action beats as Slade brings her along on a mission to Gotham, which I'll get into in a bit. When it comes to the stories themselves, this is a series that works really well in single issue and trade form. The single issues pack a lot of story and character moments while being mindful of the larger story arc. So if you're a single issues guy and you're worried that this might not have enough content for your taste, rest assured Priest packs more than enough into each 20-page issue to give you your money's worth. It's really impressive that someone who's been away from superhero comics for so long is still able to exert so much control without losing his edge. Where the book does start to stumble a bit are certain portions of the plot progression. Some of it is a little convoluted because we don't always have a direct window into Slade's head. Oftentimes we're seeing him through other characters, and the whole idea of Deathstroke is that he's got this tactical mind. So sometimes he's showing us one thing, but that's what he wants us, the reader, and characters to see, until he does what he's actually planning on. And as a result, that does lead to us sometimes being led along thinking, wait, why are we going to Gotham to do this again and get into a conflict with Batman and Robin? Later, when it does pull back the curtain a bit, it then turns into, well, okay, I see why you're doing that now, kind of. But I have the feeling this will become more clear as the series built more momentum, and this does add fuel to the idea that this works first and foremost in single issues, since it is designed to be read as a twice-monthly title, and later is collected into a trade. I would also be remiss not to bring up the artwork. There are two primary artists on the series, Carlo Pagulayan and Joe Bennett. Carlo does the first half of the book and is my favorite of the two, working on the Rebirth one-shot and issues 1 and 2. He has a gritty style to him, his action has weight behind it, the characters look great, the flashbacks fit in well with the main narrative, and the panel layouts and overall storytelling are proficient. And then Joe Bennett comes in for the second half with the Rose portion. It's a bit of a visual departure from Carlo due to Carlo being considerably more gritty in his approach, while Bennett has a bit more of a cartoonist vibe. It's not a drastic difference that takes you out of the book, and I do feel it is a fit for his portion of the story. Bennett does well visualizing the father-daughter dynamic between Rose and Slade, his action is fluid, and even to his credit is able to do a cool take on the latest version of the Batsuit, which I'm usually not too keen on, no offense to the Batbook creators currently. However, I am a little concerned for the book's visual identity going forward. I would like to see Carlo remain on the book as the series' long-term artist. I know it's becoming harder for artists to stay on superhero comics long-term, especially with the bulk of DC Rebirth's line being on a bi-monthly schedule, but Carlo does seem to be the artist who fits best with Priest's style, and I'm not sure if he'll be sticking around for Volume 2 or what's going to happen going forward, but if DC is able to keep a consistent visual team on this book for the long run, whether that's in a bi-monthly or monthly series format, that would really help in distinguishing it from the other titles. With the rest of the plot, it's looking to be a promising long-form story. There are a few moments that hint at the ongoing threat for Slade, but Priest doesn't delve too much into that threat with this volume, so it seems like he'll be sticking around for a while to flesh it out. And given the way Priest and company executed their first story, it's a prospect I welcome with open arms. The quality of the trade itself is well constructed. Typically for the big two companies, the quality of their trades tend to vary a bit. The new 52 paperbacks, for instance, had noticeable binding issues after only one read-through. Fortunately, this is not a factor with Deathstroke. After finishing up one read-through and dozens of skims for review purposes, the binding seems to be as strong as when I first purchased it. The paper quality is equally excellent. It feels good to flip through, there's not much of a glare when reading in the light like other glossy trades, and it complements the art. Not much else I can ask for there. The price of the trade is $16.99 and contains the Deathstroke Rebirth one-shot, which really should be Deathstroke issue 1 for all intents and purposes, along with Deathstroke issues 1 through 5. So you have 6 issues which were originally priced at $2.99 per issue. So you're essentially saving $1 if you go with the trade. Usually trades for that much content tend to be around the $20 mark, so that's a really good deal on DC's part to make it more affordable for readers to try out. Deathstroke is a book with plenty of promise that seems to be indicative of the Rebirth initiative on the whole, putting a good step forward and promising some interesting stories to come, with a good price point, a compelling take on Slade, and solid artwork. I would definitely recommend picking this up for full price. If you can find it cheaper, good for you, but if you're at a comic shop and you see this book on the shelves and you only have enough money for one DC trade that week, it's well worth your money.